Really a pleasure being here today with LaFawn. Hi, LaFawn. So
Hello.
nice to be here with you today. We have just 30 minutes, which may seem like a lot, but it's not. So
It's so short.
it is. But we have an important topic to talk about. I want to encourage the audience, although we don't see you, we really want that to be as engaging as possible. And just feel free to ask your questions. And as they pop here in the chat, LaFawn, I'll do my best.
Okay, that sounds great.
But let's start. Can you start by just telling a little bit about yourself, about your career journey and your current role at Indeed?
Sure. So had a little bit in the intro, but I am born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so my career actually started with the first .com bubble and burst. And lots of companies I worked for don't exist anymore, but it was an exciting time. And I really started in operations. Operational efficiency is my love language. So it wasn't until I got to Google that I started to work on diversity as one of the founding leaders of the Black Googlers Network. And it really opened my eyes to kind of what this work could entail, both inside and outside of the company. And a lot of the companies I work for was mentioned in my intro, but I think my journey was interesting because I just kind of stumbled my way through it. And that's where I got my greatest learnings. I don't have a college degree. So a lot of what my education came from was on the job. And using my own experience, I think my intersectional layers have a lot to do with the path that I've chosen. So I am Black, I'm a woman, I'm queer, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm of a mature age, and I'm fabulous. So I think those things really contributed to the direction of my career. And I just newly stepped into the role of environmental, social, and governance at Indeed, which is around Indeed's long-term commitments for, saving the planet and diversity, inclusion, and belonging, social impact, AI ethics, and strategy and operations. So it's really expanded what I've worked on for the past, 15 plus years to really take the company in a new direction. So I'm very excited about it.
That's very exciting. And your story is very inspiring, all your background and how you got into those roles. It's very interesting. I wish we had time to discuss even further on that. So the topic we're going to talk about today is very hard for me to pronounce. The term is called Shecession.
Yes.
And the name for that is because there's a large amount of women, especially women of color, who have been forced out of the workplace due to the pandemic. So yes. I wanted to ask you, LaFawn, do you think the term is accurate? And what are the ripple effects of this that could imperil the future of women at work and women of color?
Yeah, so it is accurate, and it is a mouthful. Shecession. That's probably the last time I'm going to be able to say it clearly. But the COVID-19 pandemic has profoundly impacted working women and as the US Vice President Harris has said, nearly 3 million women have left the labor force since the pandemic started. And many more have reduced their hours to navigate current challenges. And what's more, not all women are impacted equally. Women who leave the workforce are 26% more likely to have children and 67% more likely to be a primary caregiver, including for aging parent. So women of color are disproportionately affected, being 50% more likely to have these caregiving responsibilities.
Yeah, what do you think are the ripple effect of that?
So,
future to come.
Yeah, so I think if I think about the ripple effect, or if I'm thinking about kind of, the trends that have sort of come out of that, inequities really did exist pre-COVID, and those inequities are exacerbated and surfaced even more by the pandemic. So all of the gaps that we had, the inequities that we had, they just surfaced even more because of this. And since women have had to leave the workforce or reduce their hours, it's really set us back. as far as gender equality in the workforce. And so I do worry. I do worry about our progress. I do worry about where we're going to land when we come out of this pandemic.
So basically, you're saying that we had this all along, it just got worse.
Absolutely.
Due to the pandemic.
Absolutely.
That's very sad. And are there any trends we are seeing now as a result of the pandemic that came as a surprise, something that was not expected, we haven't seen before?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of, building off of what we just talked about, the inequities that presented itself. Again, they've always been there, but they've just grown with the pandemic and economic uncertainty. And so Black women and other women of color in particular overwhelmingly occupy so-called essential jobs. So nursing homes, grocery stores, for examples. And many lost their jobs or are working in roles where they had to put their lives on the line every single time they came into work. And most in these positions had to make hard decisions to survive, either with their physical well-being or with their economic stability. Communities historically having the widest pay gaps have been hit the hardest during the pandemic. So looking back, that extra money that could have been made if the wage gaps had already been closed pre-pandemic could have made the difference between shelter or food for their families.
Mm-hmm. And on a positive note, what do you think companies can do to step up their diversity hiring and especially helping out those sectors that were hurt the most, women and women in color?
So my advice is that good intentions are no longer enough. No one wants to hear what you meant to do, what you wish you could have done, what you intend to do. Nobody wants to hear that you can't find Black women or any other dimension of diversity. Obviously, we're out here. I have a squad of folks that also do this kind of work, and we've known each other for years. They do this work at other companies, and we have a saying, impact over intentions. So if 2020 was the year of good diversity, inclusion, intentions, let's make 2021 the year of actions and impact. So now that we got that out of the way, if you're looking to step up your diversity hiring, stop and get your house in order. Because you shouldn't just want to hire a diverse workforce, you should also want to grow and keep them. So I'm going to give 5 pieces of advice. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that a company should do is focus on long-term systemic change. There's a lot of momentum and need for change right now. It's not just about the message of support or donating to a cause. Take a look at your own systems. How do you hire and grow employees? Do your succession planning, talent reviews, recruiting, and other processes have built-in bias? Is equality part of your core values? Are you actively working towards change? Recognize that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. So above all, hold yourself accountable for the way things are, and then work to improve. The second thing you do is to take a close look at your data. Share it internally, be transparent with employees of where you are now, and when possible, share it externally to be visible and accountable to the public. The third thing is to change behavior. So you want to focus on behavioral changes throughout the company with an emphasis on coaching, training, and having crucial conversations with managers. Leaders and managers set an example for the entire workforce. So if employees see the behavior of managers or leaders in a negative light, a true sense of belonging is difficult to achieve. The fourth thing is representation matters. So that if leadership roles are perceived as exclusive to many members of the workforce, then a broader sense of belonging will continue to elude many employees. People in leadership roles should reflect the diversity of a company's workforce. Observing someone like me in a leadership role helps attract and retain talent and motivates workers to pursue roles with greater responsibility. The fifth thing is to create policies and procedures that are reflective of the entire workforce. So as you work through new or existing policies and procedures, be aware of barriers experienced by different populations. Take, for example, the case of caregivers. More scheduling flexibility for calls can go a long way for employees who share their home workspace with others and must tend to family responsibilities while working remotely.
Wow, this is incredible. I would reach out to you to get this in writing, LaFawn, so we can share that broadly. Because this is
Sure.
really, talking about what actions you can take rather than the words you speak. And I worked in many companies, they say, yeah, we care about diversity, but actually haven't done anything. And,
That's right.
being even tolerant to behaviors that are not supportive of women, of people of color, people of minorities, this is unacceptable, and companies should ban those kind of behaviors and make sure it is not acceptable culture. Because
Absolutely.
those trainings, ever since I remember, I've done all those unconscious bias training and
Uh-huh.
so many trainings, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
not so much about the trainings. I mean, I think there are in many companies there are training, but no one is actually keeping, the people from,
Yeah, taking the
behaving the way
action.
they should. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really about the training and learnings are good. It's a good baseline, right?
Yeah,
It's the minimum. It's just so everyone has a shared understanding and more importantly, language about this space. But really, it's about taking the learning into action to change behavior.
absolutely. And also the thing you mentioned about leadership roles, this is so crucial. When companies have only white male in leadership positions, that sends a very strong message.
It does.
And when
Absolutely.
companies change that, that also sends a very strong message and encourage other people. So I completely relate to that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, now let's talk about the individuals, those people
Sure.
that are in distress right now. What kind of advice do you have for them? For people who are looking for a new job, potentially, trying to change their career, maybe try something new. What can they do?
Yeah, it's tough out there right now. So I'm happy to give some advice. Adaptability has always been an important part of an individual's career progression, even before COVID-19, and it is especially important now. It's important to show a potential employer how your abilities adapt to a new role or a new industry because so many things have changed. So you might not be going into the same type of job that you had before. So you want to focus on skills more than just experiences because skills can be applied in so many different ways. So for this one, I'll give you 6 pieces of advice.
Wonderful.
The first thing is perform a professional audit. Take some time to understand your qualities, your qualifications, your values that can really help focus your career transition and narrow down your career path options if you haven't done that already. Doing so can also help you understand how you might position yourself during the job search. It also helps you see how amazing you are when you really think about the skill sets you already have. Identify your hard, the second one is identify your hard and soft skills. Soft skills are often the most transferable. So identifying them early can help you understand the ways you might bring value to a new role or industry. When you take an inventory of your hard skills, that can help you identify where there may be certain industries that could be easier to transition into. The third one is to highlight your biggest career wins. Communicating the impact that you've made throughout your career can help employers quickly understand the value that you'll bring to their organization, even if you come from another role or another industry. The fourth thing is to utilize online job search to your advantage. I'm at Indeed, so it makes sense that I'm giving this advice, but pay close attention to the requirements and the duties of those jobs so you can evaluate whether the career would align with your skills, your interests, and importantly, your values. Number 5 is you just need to meet most of the qualifications. Try to focus on positions which you need at least 60% of qualifications to meet those transferable skills. You do not have to have 100% of every single bullet point on every single job position. You just need to meet 60% of them. It's not a hard rule, but it's a general guideline, because for the most part, you can probably pick up those other 2 to 3 things that you don't know right now. And then lastly, get a sense of the company. Before doing interviews, do some research on how inclusive the company really is. Look at their core values, the social media, any recent statements in support of marginalized communities. Pay attention to the interviewers themselves. Is the panel diverse, or are you likely going to be an early diversity hire? If the interviewers seem to emphasize things like culture fit, then ask what they mean by that. Basically, be an active participant in your job search, because you are interviewing the company just as much as they are interviewing you.
That is gold nuggets, you know what you just gave me. I try to take notes, but I'll follow up with you, or we'll watch the recording. We'll distill this information for everyone. And I think
Absolutely.
What you're saying is so important about identifying your strength, what you can do, and it's not necessarily the exact job title or whatever you have done before. Identifying your core strength and where it can be applied.
Absolutely.
And also,
I think a lot of women will look at a job description and go, oh, I can't do all 10 of those things, or I don't have the experience. And they count themselves out. Whereas other people will just go right in. I can do 2 of those bullets, so I'm going to apply anyway. So really it's about, and that's why you want to do that, that kind of assessment of yourself. You want to see, you want to remember how amazing you are and how adaptable you are and the skill sets you already have, so that you can feel more confident about just going for it, regardless if you have 100% of what a company is asking for.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And unfortunately, we see it's a more of a women behavior to not apply to jobs. They don't like checkbox all the qualifications versus men. Oh, we have a question. How can an untraditional resume bypass the applicant tracking system?
Aha, okay. That's actually a really great question. And something to note. So an applicant tracking system is the system in which you upload your resume. It is, reading certain keywords. A recruiter spends about 6 seconds looking at your resume, and there's certain spots that they hit with their eyes before it goes, into the hiring manager, or it goes to decline. So what you want to do is focus on having a skills-based resume. So the traditional resume is chronological. You put your company, your experience there, and you move on from there. But you really want to focus on the skills that you have, as opposed to just the companies you work for and the experience you have there. And that's especially to note if you are going into another industry where maybe it's not easy to see how it's a 1-for-1. So you want to change it to a skills-based resume, and you want to make sure that you're using keywords that are also in the job description. So if you need to translate your skills into how they talk about the skills in the job description, then you should do that within your resume. If you feel like that's not enough, you can also do a cover letter where you can explain more about why you are a great fit for the role, using, again, some of those keywords so that they can be picked up by the applicant tracking system.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. We have another question by Olivia. What are the red flags when interviewing a company?
Oh, when you're interviewing a company. Okay. So there's a few red flags. I think I gave a couple of them when you're looking at the interview panel. Is it a diverse interview panel? And if not, then, are you going to be one of the first, hires that is a Black woman or another woman of color? It's something to note, because what you don't want to do is, unless you're interviewing for a diversity position on a diversity team, you don't want to have to do that emotional labor for a company And oftentimes, if you're the first, you may have to. So it's something to note. Other red flags are kind of looking at the company culture, doing research on them. Is this company aligned with your values? Because you also want to be happy when you get there. I would ask really hard questions. I would ask things like, of course, what does success look like? What are you looking for in this role? But also things like, why are you hiring for this role right now? One of the questions that I asked before I came into Indeed of my leaders that they hadn't heard before was, why would you regret hiring me? Because what I was trying to get at was, how hard or easy is it to actually create change? What are the things and the pitfalls that other leaders fall into? You can ask questions like, what keeps you up at night? Or, what are the biggest opportunities? Those are good too. But I asked that specific question, one, to throw them off, and two, so that they would give me a little more insight into what it's like to really be a leader there. So I think when you're interviewing, you want to make sure that you're trying to understand as best you can what the culture is truly like. How much empowerment do you really have when you're coming into the organization? You want to do as much research as you can. You look on Indeed company pages. You ask people that work there, friends and family if they know it. All of those things are part of your research when you go in. But for the most part, you want to ask the tough questions. You want to ask questions about their culture and about diversity and about how they're creating an environment where everyone can feel like they belong. And if they can't answer those questions, keep pressing until you get the answers you're looking for.
Thank you so much. I am so curious to know what they answered you.
That'll be for another conversation.
Yeah, I don't see any more questions. We have 5 more minutes. So first, I want to ask, how can people contact you?
Oh, geez. I get so many contacts. So I'm, of course, on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter, LaFawn @ but I'm most active on the gram. So on the gram, I am the LaFawn @ and that's really where I have kind of most of my engagement, but you can also always contact me on LinkedIn. There's not a whole lot of LaFawns out there, but
Yeah.
but LaFawn Davis is pretty easy to find.
Yeah. And one last question. I think we have maybe time for one last question. How would you recommend approaching that first interview with a recruiter?
So in the first interview with the recruiter, they're really doing a phone screen. So they are often talking to you before it goes to the hiring manager. So what's important is to help the recruiter have enough information to say, yes, you should go to the hiring manager. It's not a full interview, but you want to relay how your skills are transferable to this role, how you know that you can make an impact, and this is how. You want to give some examples of how you can make an impact in the role. And anything else that you think would be attractive enough to say, yes, this person should go to the hiring manager. When you get to the hiring manager, that's a full interview. So you want to ask them lots of questions. You want to get all the questions. But for the recruiter, for that first phone screen, it really is just so they can understand a little bit more about you. Your resume is like your agent. Like if you were an actor in Hollywood, your resume would be like your agent, right? It speaks for you before they have a chance to meet you. So you want to make sure that you're not just regurgitating your resume. They have that information. You want to give better examples that give show in a deeper way how you're the one for that role.
So do you recommend asking less questions in the recruiter phone screen than with the hiring manager?
So with the recruiter, I would keep it pretty light, because the recruiter probably doesn't have as much depth of knowledge as what it's like to work on the team, the day-to-day duties of the role. That's really what the hiring manager and probably the rest of the interview panel will give you. So when you're talking to the recruiter, you're selling yourself, and you can ask questions like, what's the salary range? Where does this position need to be located? Things like that you want to get out of the way, core details, but I wouldn't ask a lot of the kind of cultural, hard questions of that recruiter on the phone screen.
Thank you. Yeah, we have 2 minutes, so I'm trying to be kind of tracking time. Thank you so much, LaFawn. It's been such a pleasure being with you. And
It's
Meg,
been a pleasure to be here.
back to you.